Tuesdays seem to be the day when posts that I share, whether it be personally or from my firm's account, that seems to be the day of the week that the posts receive the most engagement. I would say Wednesdays as well. Fridays were always sort of seemed as like sort of a dump, but based on the suggestions I received from the social media management tool that I use, I've seen sort of an uptick on like recommendations for Friday posts. I've seen that also. I don't know if that's because most of the posts that we share on Fridays seem to be more like, let's say, human interest, if you will, in their nature. Because again, I want to leave people at the end of their work week with like something that feels good. So perhaps maybe that's why I'm getting some recommendations on Fridays. So that's something to take into account, like the whether it be the topic or like the sentiment of the post. Like just think about, okay, if it's heavy, maybe I don't want to share this on a Monday or a Friday because you don't want to leave that with your audience. You may want to reserve that for something in the middle of the week. If it's more light in nature, perhaps you do share that on whether it be a Monday or a Friday because you don't want to be too heavy at the beginning of the week, or you want to send people off on a good note at the end of the week. But with respect to times, I would say, again, no perfect answer, but take into account where your audience is located. So, I'm based on the East Coast, and this is from a personal standpoint. So a lot of my connections are based on the East Coast. So I'm more likely to share things within the regular 9 to 5 hour. But let's say, you're based, let's say that hypothetically someone's based on the East Coast, but they have like whether it be a book of business or their organization is based on the West Coast. This actually applies to me because my firm's headquarters and a lot of our clients are on the West Coast. You may, just because I'm on the East Coast, my sort of like working hours don't coincide with the client's working hours. So you just want to keep that in mind and sort of work off of the working hours and business hours of those connections or of those clients. With respect to the various social media platforms on like and the question of what type of content should I be posting on which platform, really that's when you need to take into account like your audience and where they're going to be most engaged. So what I found over the course of the years is, if you want to share things that relate to sort of like, whether it be in my case firm culture, sort of like the human interest pieces, that's content that I'm more likely to share on Facebook. I have found that the LinkedIn audience, there's a lot more of that storytelling taking place. So I would say, go ahead, share it there as well. Twitter, not so much. I think Twitter really is a place that's very news centric. Folks aren't necessarily going there to find out more about whether it be your organization's culture, their sort of like HR, recruiting, or talent efforts. There, it's solely news. But with respect to those other things, I think that LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I've seen that Instagram is really where more people are migrating to with respect to whether it be recruiting or firm culture. Facebook, it's sort of this, I don't want to call it a no man's land, but it's not necessarily being as engaged, or at least the company pages that are being managed there aren't being as engaged as much as they once were. Because I really think that Instagram has sort of replaced that platform in that capacity.
LinkedIn is primarily is a platform for professionals, and we use LinkedIn to really share relevant industry updates, events, and networking. And I think that there's a fine line between when are you looking to push content that is relevant to your kind of your career and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis within your profession. And that content is a little bit more, just informative, kind of to the point. There's obviously a level of engagement that you want, where you want people to comment and say, this is well thought out. I appreciate your perspective, or maybe they like it. But then there's also, I think we see a lot of content that is aligned with more of that personal kind of, it's usually longer form. It's not related to anything within necessarily your profession. It's more of a personal update. And I think that we're seeing more of that. And while it may seem a little bit, not fitting for the LinkedIn platform, I think there is a benefit to it because it does, I think, allow us to see more vulnerabilities in people. And I think that that's really important, especially when it comes to networking. But there are other forums for those types of, I would say, more social posts. You obviously have e-groups, working groups, Instagram, Twitter. Those are all, and even Facebook, I suppose, those are all forums that are really well suited for discussion, where LinkedIn is not so much a discussion platform. So if you are wanting to ask questions and looking for feedback from other professionals or other people within the industry, I would suggest looking at other social sites aside from LinkedIn to kind of facilitate that communication, that discussion, or those types of forums. And then just kind of leaving LinkedIn for more of the, again, professional updates, either within your industry, specific to your day-to-day job, or maybe some of those more personal touches where, we're seeing people really be more vulnerable about themselves and what they're kind of interested in, or, hardships that they've had over the last several years. So that's kind of the approach. I think there's no right or wrong answer, but I would say that, LinkedIn is more of that professional platform.
On LinkedIn specifically, the algorithm, which by the way, no one knows how the algorithm works. We all have just hunches. The hunch and the theory is that on LinkedIn, comments drive engagement. So if you comment on someone's post, it will likely be the case that LinkedIn will broadcast that post to your followers. So commenting does have a big impact. Reacting does too. And you'll find in different platforms, they prioritize both of those things differently, like comments versus reactions. But as a rule of thumb, if I want to amplify someone's content, I tend to do both. I do reaction plus a comment. And by the way, the comments are best done if you share something thoughtful. You don't want to just say, I agree, and then that's it. Or like one of those like the pre-filled examples, because that will come across as inauthentic. And I think you miss an opportunity to really share some insights and maybe an anecdote in a substantive comment. So I would say if you're going to comment, leave something meaningful. Don't just say I agree, or the worst ones are the generic congrats whenever someone gets a new role. Like put some thought into the comment, and that'll be very helpful in driving engagement.
When you go to, if you're going to go create a brand new post on your LinkedIn, at the very top under your name, there's a little drop down. It says like post to, and it's going to be set to either everyone, your connections only, or a specific group. So you can go in and on each post, you can change it, or you can kind of set it across the board and be able to use the same privacy settings for all of your posts, but you can go in and change it. If you have it selected to only your connections, then only people within your network will see it. Again, if you do have a tag where you've tagged somebody else into the post, they will be able to see the content that you've shared, but they won't necessarily be able to reshare it. You can only reshare the content with broader networks if it's available to everyone. And that actually means everyone on and off LinkedIn. So that content is available, on the World Wide Web. You could search it, through any Google search or any other forum. But it is really beneficial, though, going back to using hashtags. If you have content that is relevant and you want to really gain more traction and gain more people kind of looking at your content, you do want to post to everyone. Again, it allows you to share it with other networks, as well as then have people be able to access it if they are using the hashtags and following those hashtags. One thing to note, though, is that if you post something on LinkedIn, you actually cannot go back and change the privacy of the post. So if you posted it initially as something to just your network or maybe a specific group that you're in, if you go and you want to change it to sharing with everyone because maybe people want to share that post, you actually cannot go in and change that privacy setting. You would have to delete the post altogether and start over and change and make sure that you have the everyone setting when you go up to post it.
So when it comes to how often you should be posting, I have sort of two answers for this, one from an individual user perspective and also for anyone who's managing a company account, because they're very different. So for an individual user, you have a little bit more leeway. With LinkedIn, I would say try to limit your posts to no more than I would limit it to one post per day, and I wouldn't share more than 2 to 3 times a week. And especially if you find that people aren't engaging with your posts, that should make you pause and consider, okay, why is it that people aren't engaging with my posts? Am I sharing posts about content that isn't of interest to my connections or my audience? Am I actually spamming them? Am I posting or oversharing? Those are things to consider. If you are the manager of a company page, you should really listen to what, and this is specific to LinkedIn. With Twitter, you have a lot more leeway because things in that algorithm, they get cycled out so quickly. But with LinkedIn, what they have actually shared is based on their algorithm. The more posts that you share per day, again, you're working for an organization, you probably have a lot that you have to share every day of the week. Try to limit to no more than 3 to 4 posts per day. And the reason is LinkedIn will only surface a post, one post from your page, and that's not even a guarantee. But if they do, they'll only share one post per day per login per user. So if someone's only logging in one time a day, you only have one shot to get their attention. If you've already shared, let's say 5, 6, 7 posts, it's not guaranteed that, let's say you wrote something for someone who's like in the financial industry, but you've shared 5 other items that relate to something completely different. That user who's only interested in that finance news they may not be served up that content that you shared. So you want to be mindful of how much you're sharing per day.